WL Shuffle, and today's video is the follow-up about paths. I made a video earlier, or I posted it earlier today, about how to edit save files, and a couple people, jokingly or not, said I might, get under Red Hook's skin with it, so I got rid of the video, so it's gone. But, so this is, I guess, the next alternative, and I probably should have just made this to start, honestly. I should have just made this, so. Background footage is the Twitch stream. If you don't watch on Twitch Live, you should, but there you go. So, this video is talking about paths for two reasons. One, I made a comment during the last video that a lot of people actually seem to respond to, and no one was a jerk, which was cool. Everyone was cool, respectable, and nice, and I got a few different comments from people saying, can't believe how nice this community is, so thanks everyone for doing that. And the reason I made that comment, because people disagreed with it, understandably so. So my comment was that I said paths might be a mistake, and I need to clarify that. I am happy they're in the game. I'm happy they exist. I like characters getting specializations that change how they play. I think that is very cool and fun, and if you go back at any point, I've been saying that paths were a very smart idea, and whoever came up with them deserves all the credit in the world, so I've had praises in the past. The reason I'm calling them potentially a mistake now is because now we've gotten the third path for every hero, and it's really showing some issues the game is having, and this is early access, so this is the time to talk about that. Like, if we get these fixed now, great. It's going to be much harder or justifiable to get this kind of stuff fixed when the game is released, because, if something sells well, for instance, they may go, well, people play it, so who cares? Not that Red Hook is that way, but, companies in general tend to act like that. It's much harder to get these types of entities to go back and make sweeping changes after the fact, although they did do it in like Color of Madness, for instance, when they went back and made certain abilities only useful a limited amount of times, just as an example. So it's not that they can't do it, but I would rather just do it now when everyone's focused on that. So the reason I say that paths are a mistake is because specifically they're fixing characters through paths instead of fixing the abilities. And one example that came up, actually two examples, right? So we have Venom Drop Grave Robber. That's the path that gives her Flashing Dagger's Blight, and she loses range damage on top plus speed. So it's kind of a weird path. It's the weakest one she has, but it's also the most fair, and so that kind of shows you why this is an issue, because the paths that we got before were largely very powerful, and this current branch of them actually seems kind of in line and more fair. So Venom Drop Grave Robber, Flashing Daggers is not a good move. It wasn't a good move in the first game, it's not a good move in this game, although it's a bit better in this game because you have the ability to remove 2 enemies worth of dodge and block and whatever by pinging them with Flashing Daggers, so that's what makes it good. And we see here with Venom Drop that the goal of this path is to fix Flashing Daggers without fixing Flashing Daggers directly. So Flashing Daggers is only good on technically 2 out of 3 paths right now, because it's actually pretty solid on Deadeye, and it's the focus of, Venom Drop, and then there are also trinkets that fix it. Instead of just fixing the ability itself, we're going all the way around and doing a bunch of other things. We've given it 2 paths that buff it, and now it has trinket support, when we could just buff the ability. And Anamnesis is the other one that immediately comes to my mind. So Occultist got a new path called Aspirant, where it gives him extra melee damage and then specifically 150% Anamnesis damage. Anamnesis is a melee move, and you have to be upfront to use it. Me being very comfortable with Frontline Occultist because of Darkest Dungeon 1, I don't really feel afraid to run him up there or run this move. And this path, instead of fixing Anamnesis, which wasn't really great as a skill. It was okay. You'd hit the enemy for a couple points of damage and then bleed them. Now it's insane because of a path. And so instead of fixing these abilities, same with Malediction in current Ritualist, they tried to buff it a little bit doing that instead of just buffing Malediction. And so that's the issue we keep running into. And you can go through every character and find an issue that they may have had that is being attempted to be fixed by paths, for the most part. And this is what I have issue with. Instead of just fixing the abilities, they're making paths and just kind of like power creeping it, you know, and it's going to be a bigger issue because what if they actually go back and decide to fix these? Now all of a sudden you have all these paths that boost all these moves that should have been good in the first place, and you just make them ridiculous. So I just want to head this off as best we can and fix the abilities sooner rather than later. But I also know that the characters they haven't really talked about them getting reworked yet. They said that that's kind of like the ongoing change is balance. So until we hear about a dedicated character balance patch, I'm just going to keep talking about it. So I apologize. The other points that I have for why paths are kind of a mistake is the balance compared to base Wanderer is insane. That's kind of what that last rant was about, was that the base abilities of most of the characters are just not that good. And they're largely fair. The game feels like it's balanced around partly paths in some instances, and then partly just Wanderers in others. The game should be balanced around Wanderers. And if we're not doing that, that's kind of an issue. But when I go to the Crossroads and I boot up a new run and I see like 7 Wanderers, I feel bad because there's nothing interesting going on with the characters. There's no, changes that I can do. There's no funky teams I can put together. And these complaints, this was kind of a later point I was going to make. These complaints are really just focused on people like me that have played it for, hundreds of hours. So I know that the casual experience will be a bit different, but these are issues I think if we solve them, everyone will be better for it. But I digress. The balance with base Wanderer is pretty bad, and paths make base Wanderer so unappealing that if you get 4 paths and like 5 Wanderers at the Crossroads, you're probably just looking at the path characters and seeing how they can work together before you even consider taking a Wanderer. And yes, Wanderers can be used to plug the gaps in your team, but they shouldn't feel like that. They shouldn't feel like, I can't make these other characters work, so I'm just gonna throw Man-at-Arms in there, even though he's a Wanderer. Like, Wanderer should have something else with it, and I talked about that in the previous video. The other issue with paths is that all of the best ones, like the ones I think are the best ones, they all have either bonus life or bonus damage or both. Even the ones that have like bonus damage and minus HP, like Tempest, are still good enough because this game is very damage racy. And so what happens too is since we have all these paths now that all the characters have, and a lot of them boost their damage in some way, this further incentivizes killing enemies quickly instead of controlling them. Why focus on using Daemon's Pull to disrupt stuff or Echoing March if I don't have Intermezzo? Even if I did, why focus on those things when I can get Vanguard, Man-at-Arms, or Ravager Hellion? Those are always my go-to examples. Or even Surgeon Plague Doctor, or Aspirant Occultist with, Sack Stab bonus damage, Tempest, like all these other paths that just hit super hard and kill enemies in 1 or 2 turns anyway. Why do anything else when I can just do that outside of just, wanting to have fun and do something different? I don't know. There are some fights that do really well against the damage race meta. Stuff like the Creature Dens are actually very good at combating that, just because a lot of the enemies spawn in with a lot of defenses, which I don't want to see every enemy come like that. But the other thing too is, since there are 2 waves that you don't get a break in between fighting, when you kill the last enemy actually matters. So really counting out your damage and playing it a bit slow, putting on buffs before the next wave comes out, all of that matters. So the Creature Den actually gets it right as an encounter. A lot of the other ones don't. This isn't even about road fights. 2 out of 4 regions incentivize you killing enemies incredibly quickly. So the Sprawl and the Shroud. those two regions have enemies that if they're not dead on turn 2, you're going to be taking a ton of damage, and that just reinforces all of these issues. No damage over time, it's too slow. Hit them really hard with Howling In because that goes through block or crush or whatever. To make this a compliment sandwich, I do like paths. I know I just talked about how they are potentially a mistake, but that's just in the one instance that I'm thinking. But otherwise, I do like them. I do think that they are good for the game just because the specialization of it can be really fun. You know, it does force you to build awkward teams or play things that you normally wouldn't. And some of them, like Yellow Hand with Highwayman, how that gives him stealing on highway robbery at base instead of having to upgrade it. You know, it fundamentally changes the character, and it goes from like, yeah, I'm gonna do all this damage and duelist advance and point blank shot or whatever, to I'm literally looking for turns to use highway robbery. Apparently we got a very cool picture up here too on Twitch, so that's just jumped out at me. But yeah, I'm just playing the bot in the background, so I apologize. Otherwise, I do like paths. I want to see them reined in because they're starting to get very strong, like really getting into power creep territory, and this is like the time to do it. And then we should change the heroes also on top of that. Next point of the video, next big point with paths is that we need a reroll button. So when I say a reroll button, I mean you go to the crossroads, you don't like what you see, hit the reroll, you get 9 new people in there with different paths, different quirks, whatever, and you get to, you know, try it again and see what you can come up with. The reason I really want this, for one, you know, this is again another very niche complaint because I'm a content creator, so I really want things to test. I want to show stuff off, and it takes about 4 to 6 minutes, depending on how fast you get and how lucky you get, to make it to the first in order to abandon the run and re-roll the crossroads now. It's a long time. And I've always had this issue with, especially Slay the Spire of all games, because when you start that game, you start with a bonus at the start of the run, and if you reset the run before you make it to the first boss, or if you die before you get to the first boss, you don't get the bonus. Like, you get 2 other bonuses that are still decent, but they're not as fun or cool or just wild as the other bonuses. And it's not that you can't win with these, it's just that it's less fun. And every time I've seen this brought up, the people that defend STS for this say things like, well, it only takes like 5 minutes to get to the boss. It only takes, you know, 10 minutes if you're slow or something like that. Just put it on no ascension, take, you know, really fast class or something like that, and just, you know, run your way up there as fast as you can, get to the boss, and then just die. And then you get to reroll. And it's like, why do I have to waste 5 minutes? This applies to this game too. Why do I have to waste 5 minutes to do something that I want to have fun with, you know? And so that's what led me to do what I made the video about that I took down, where someone taught me, actually a few people taught me how to edit the paths you get at the crossroads, and I started doing that. I'm probably going to be doing it for the foreseeable future. Well, I'll probably like see what I get and then see if there's anything fun. If there's nothing fun, then I'm going to go back and try and make something interesting, because that's just what I want to do. And that's the thing I want to get to as well, is this is a single player game. And so if people want to sit there and hit reroll over and over until they luck out and hit 4 masters or get, you know, amazing synergy between 3 heroes, 4 heroes, let them. Who cares? It's a single player game. Get into rant territory. I feel like my voice is escalating, so I apologize about that. But honestly, if they're not going to let us pick paths, this is the next best thing. So, what are my other points here? Man, did I cover all that? I kind of went out of order a little bit. Yeah? Yeah, I covered most of it. Okay, the one last point that I do have is the game is gonna run into an identity crisis at some point, and I don't... That sounds, again, like when I say paths are a mistake, people take this like out of context, like, whoa, chef. I'm not trying to use like alarmist language. but I'm trying to use very plain and like direct language when I talk about this. So Darkest Dungeon 1 is a tactical, turn-based, grindy meat grinder, because your characters die all the time, usually, type of RPG. This game wants to take that combat and like put it into a roguelike or roguelite or whatever the frick they're called these days. And that's totally 100% cool. It's fun. I like the idea. But there's something with roguelites, as I've been playing more and more of them, you know, over the last few years as the channel's grown, I've just gotten into them more. It's actually a genre I love. They break. This is a genre that you're supposed to break. You get a couple crazy items or some special powers or some super rare thing, or you're clever enough to put together a bunch of pieces, and it may take you, you know, 2 hours or an hour, 30 minutes or however long the game is to get there, and you're only God mode for about 20 minutes at that sometimes, but that is the purpose. You take what you know, you get a random sandbox of stuff, you put it together and see how well you can break what's in front of you. And that happens in pretty much every other roguelite. You know, I've seen Slay the Spire runs where people have like infinite block and, you know, ridiculous damage turns, or in Binding of Isaac today I had a good run and some people are like, oh no, this isn't breaking the game stuff, and it's like, wow, I can't even imagine what the game looks like when it is broken. And so Darkest Dungeon is going to be challenged with that. Is it going to be the super deep tactical thinking turn-based game that you really have to think about, and the items you get, you know, contribute to your strategy, but everything is kind of fair, you know? Or is it going to be, you get Orphan Runaway, 2 trinkets, and then she crits Firefly for 84 damage and burn. True story, that's what happened. It's going to be one or the other. Or I guess the best case scenario is going to be it's a like a deep thinking game until that point, and then it just breaks and you stop thinking. I don't know. It sounds more negative than it is, doesn't it? No, it's not. I promise. It's all not doom and gloom. Like, people are so hysterical these days, man. Let me see my thing. Yeah, it got dark, but yeah. So I still, overall, I do love the direction the game's heading in. It's more fun than it's ever been. So don't get it twisted. Don't think that, you know, the sky's falling. It's got a lot of good stuff, and every time they update the game, it shows me that even if they have to go back and kind of hammer out some of the dents, they have a really good idea of where they're trying to go, and they come up with some really creative solutions to problems. And that's why I'm trying to put these problems out there, or at least talk about what I think are problems, because I know there's a lot of smart people there, and I want to see what they can come up with, because I want this to be a game that everyone enjoys, you know, or at least people that enjoy this type of genre. You know, you're not going to get the Fortnite people. Maybe you will. I don't know. But I guess that's it for this. So thanks for watching. Let me know what you're thinking down below. And remember, even though I said some certain things, don't freak out about it. Don't think that the world's exploding. It's all in the purpose of discussions. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.